Welcome to Building Your Leader Brand. Today on the show, Bob is speaking with Nicole Osborne.
I know this is sort of a harsh truth for people because it's so much easier to talk about expertise in a way, but really, would your prospective client find that interesting? Would that really relate to them? Would they say to you, yeah, that's exactly what's been going on. That's exactly what we've been thinking. So that was my second point. Really review your post again and say, okay, who is it for? Peers? Why would you post for peers, really? Or is it for our prospective clients? Is it for the last sales call person you had who maybe just needed that little nudge?
Hi there, and welcome back to Building Your Leader Brand. My name is Bob Gentle, and every week I speak to incredible people who share their secrets to building, marketing, and monetizing their expertise and the mindset you need for your business to grow and thrive. If you're new to the show, then while you have whatever device it is in your hand, take a second to subscribe. And if you are new, do subscribe. We like new people here. So this week, we're going to be diving into content marketing and in particular, LinkedIn. And to help me with this is one of my LinkedIn guides. I have many because I take LinkedIn very seriously. Nicole Osborne. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much for letting me be your guest for the second time. I was absolutely delighted to see your invitation. Thank you.
Well, you are a return visitor. I think you're probably one of my very early guests when I was very new and terrified of podcasting. So thanks for that. Thanks for enduring me in my bumbling incompetent phase. This is my second bumbling incompetent phase, but I'm much more comfortable doing it now. So for the listener who's meeting you for the first time, could you maybe just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what it is you actually do?
Thank you. I would love to. So I'm Nicole Osborne. I am a German living in Northwest London. I've actually moved to England about 30 years ago. And nowadays I specialize in helping digital agency founders land their best clients, particularly with LinkedIn. And I've worked in marketing now for 25 years. So I'm a classically trained marketeer through and through. So when agency founders work with me, we do love talking about marketing and really making sure that everything they do on LinkedIn and across their other digital channels really helps them to position themselves as the go-to person in their space. I work with people one-to-one, and I also have a strategy done with you service, and I also have a strategy service. And I absolutely love taking people through that roadmap of finding their voice, of finding what makes themselves and their agency and their team so amazing, and then bringing that out on LinkedIn. So that's a little bit about me.
I think that's...
Sorry, my words are stuck today.
Sorry, editors. Honestly, I've been the podcast guest many times, and you think you can speak. We all think as adults that we can speak, but you try speaking when somebody's hit record. Suddenly, your ability to operate as an adult just disappears. So, agency owners, I think they're a really interesting group. Having been an agency owners, I can say that with a lot of confidence, because they're people a lot of the time with very finely tuned aesthetic sense. They know how they want things to look, and a lot of the time they're perfectionists. And I think it's a great case study for the rest of the entrepreneurial business owner world. So if you're somebody who doesn't identify as agency owner, don't turn off, don't end the call, because there's going to be something in here for everybody. I think this is going to be a really useful conversation. So you would think, and everybody listening will think, agency owners have it easy. They've got stuff to show. They've got stuff to talk about all the time. They've got clients. And yet, in my experience, agency owners are some of the most reluctant to show up online. And I think it's probably a good place to begin the conversation. When you meet a new agency owner who's invisible, and I think that's 95% of agency owners, how do you walk them towards accepting foundational visibility? And we can go beyond that later, but you know the kind of person I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it does seem to be really my niche of working with people who are really reluctant about stepping out of the sort of not being known, stepping into the limelight. And I completely understand that. What is so beautiful with most agency owners, particularly in the marketing field, they get the value of marketing yourself. and they get the value of showing up in a unique way because they have a lot of competition. So on a rational level, as business owners who probably very likely to be very talented, very passionate about their work, they usually do the most amazing jobs for their own clients. They really understand why it's so important. Now, the bit about the lack of confidence or that feeling of being awkward, having to put yourself out there, that ickiness, it is a total human feeling. We all have it. And, whether you've been in business for 1 year, 10 years or 20 years, I don't think it gets ever any easier to sort of put yourself out there. So what I really do in the beginning is asking them for what's motivating you to be wanting to increase your visibility. And often the answer will be, well, we've done really well with referrals. Our clients love us and they recommend us to their contacts, and that's working really well for us, and our work's amazing, so people stay. But we want to be more proactive with our pipeline. Perhaps an agency founder wants to sell the agency or to grow the team, or they've just come to a junction in their business life where they want to go for bigger projects, for more complicated projects, or just bigger budgets. And that's really when the need to market themselves kicks in. So taking it back to why they would want to tackle that fear. And, I was born in former Eastern Germany, and the wall came down in 1989 and we brought it down peacefully. So I always refer to kind of imposter syndrome, the nervousness, I have nothing interesting to say. My audience isn't interested in me at all. I am not an expert. I don't know how to show up. Those are all linked in Berlin walls of fear. And in my experience, as soon as people start taking a small action, whether that's just updating their profile or connecting with someone they already know, it builds that confidence. So I would definitely say to everyone out there and the listeners who's also feeling that nervousness, please don't be hard on yourself. It's a total human feeling. I don't know anyone who truly gets out of bed in the morning and thinks, yay, I want to promote my services business. I want to promote my agency. That's a really learned skill. So it's really about tapping into their why, but then also looking at, okay, so what are some of your existing strengths? Sometimes people love taking photos, or they have a really great sense of humor. Or as you said, for agency owners, they're likely to have a portfolio that could be websites, it could be design work. So how could you show a way of sharing that in a LinkedIn setting, which doesn't feel too boastful, which doesn't feel awkward? and then really teaching them that. So it's by taking these small steps that builds confidence, and then with a lot of encouragement and accountability as well. But I remember the first time I posted something on LinkedIn. So I had a corporate career. I was a marketing director, and we had the most amazing agencies doing all of our social media. So the first time I had to post something on LinkedIn just for Nicole Osborne and my business, I was absolutely petrified. So I connected with one of my business friends because I was so fed up with all the procrastination, because I wanted to be more proactive about my marketing. I wanted to have those juicy clients. And I told her that I was going to post something and that she was to really give me a hard time if I didn't post it. And that worked. Obviously, you can't be doing that every day of a week, but it's just find the thing which could encourage you to do that. Whether it's a friend or whether it's a paid for coach, whatever it might be, find that accountability, because it is so worth it. Because, when you have a great service to offer, and I'm sure many of your audience members do, when someone else is out there just shouting louder because it becomes more natural to them, they might not be offering such an amazing service as you and your team are. So it's really worth working on this pain barrier. So yes, working on it step by step with a lot of encouragement as well.
As you were speaking, I'm seeing parallels in lots of different industries. And the phrase thought leadership kept popping into my mind. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one that it's overused to the point where it's quite cringy. However, one thing that I noticed in agency land, and this is going to be true whether you're a consultant, an advisor, whether you make your living from speaking, or you make your living as an animator or a marketer, there are these people who seem to get all the opportunities. and they are the people that people hold up as these are the leaders. These are the people that we give the work to because everybody says they're the best. And a lot of the time it's because they created the conditions for everyone to believe that. Yeah. And it can trigger jealousy. It can trigger frustration. And we think, why did they get all the opportunities? It's because they created those conditions, whether through intention or accident. And thought leadership is leading with your thinking in order to create the conditions that people see you as a leader and you see those opportunities. That's what this is for. This isn't being hyper visible because of vanity. This is being as visible as we possibly can and being intentional about what that visibility communicates in order that we can create the conditions for opportunity. That's what this is for. And it doesn't matter what business you're in.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that, I know as a LinkedIn trainer, obviously I spend relatively more time on LinkedIn than anyone else. But even for myself, LinkedIn is just a marketing activity. There are other things I do to build my business. So it's very much, I know there's a lot of approaches on LinkedIn. Post 30 times a week, send 100 DMs, reach people out you don't know. And yes, that works for some businesses. But for my clients, they only need another 20 really good clients for that year to be able to really grow, or perhaps it's even less, perhaps it's even 5 clients. So it's really reflecting on, why am I doing this? What is your version of thought leadership? What is a bit about thought leadership you would love to do? And, when you dig deeper into this, a lot of people are really born teachers. So if you then, for example, can combine, well, I love training my team in something, or I love training my clients in something. Why don't I do this with LinkedIn? Why don't I do this with the kind of people our company would love to service? Or perhaps, if there might be some DIY options or some done-for-you options, and then teach, but teach in a way which is actually welcomed on LinkedIn. Yeah. Because with thought leadership, but the thing I've struggled with the term thought leadership, it's like, yes, leadership, but sometimes leadership can also be very aloof. I believe it's so important, particularly on LinkedIn, is that relatable expertise. So sharing from your personal stories relevant to your ideal audience, as opposed to perhaps positioning yourself sort of on this pedestal and then always being Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Perfect. Because if it's the one thing I really learned over the last 9 years of running my own business, and prior to that, coaching my own marketing teams, no one really wants to learn from Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect. You're much more likely to take someone's advice than maybe they're 5 steps ahead or even just 2 steps ahead. So this is what I don't like about the term thought leadership. And you rightly said it's so overused. For me, it's all about that relatable expertise. So I hope this is one thing your listeners can really sort of reflect on for themselves. How can I show that relatable expertise with what I do on LinkedIn?
I agree with you, but I often reflect on how people don't think about the idea of thought leadership, because it's very easy, and I think most people do approach the idea of thought leadership as, I have thoughts and I'm going to bestow them upon you. Yes. And this is most people's, when they hear thought leadership and people tell them to do it, that's the approach. But if you speak to a craftsman of any kind in any industry, somebody who really knows, they're a genuine expert, what they recognize is questions are the most important thing. And if you approach thought leadership from the perspective of humility, here's a great question. Let's play with it. And I think that when people approach it that way, it becomes much more accessible. And I think that's kind of what you were describing there.
Absolutely.
Approaching content marketing playfully from a perspective of humility and understanding that my expertise is relative. I don't need to be the guru. I need to be the person who knows enough to understand what a good question is.
Absolutely, because a question really makes it relatable to your audience. Because, this leads on to something else I really see people struggle with on LinkedIn. I hear a lot, whether it's from agency owners or service providers, hey, Nicole, I don't know what my audience likes. I post something and it feels like just shouting into the void. Now, obviously, when you're shouting into the void, that's not going to be a good return on your investment of time. So by asking questions, and actually questions which are relevant to the kind of companies or the kind of people you would love to work with, that makes it relatable. So I think you're absolutely right. Make that thought leadership relatable and turn it into actually really helpful questions for your audience. I love that idea, Bob.
So something else that I think is really important for people to recognize is, and again, this is why this conversation is, for me, extremely important. You're talking about agencies wanting clients. There's kind of, the reason people go beyond the pain threshold is because they want the results. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned sort of posts not going, you didn't use these words, but we post content and people can be frustrated that they don't see the results. They don't get lots of engagement. They don't get lots of comments and likes. And they think I'm failing. But what I recognize is your content can just be for one person sometimes. If you have a sales process, and most agencies will have sales processes, who's the person that the potential client is being met by? Who's doing the selling to them? The first thing a new potential client is going to do when you reach out to them is check you out. And what's the version of you that they're meeting? And this is actually a huge opportunity for you to shape your brand in the mind. Our personal brand is what exists in the mind of the person that matters to you.
Yeah.
And your content is your opportunity to shape that. And I often use the analogy, I'm doing way too much talking, Nicole. Slap me in a moment.
I'm not slapping you.
I often use the analogy of an impressionist painting. That if you go up close to an impressionist painting, it's just lots of blobs. But if you step back, it's created a scaffold for the imagination. And our content marketing is designed to do this, is to create enough of a scaffold for the imagination to fill in the blanks. If you don't do that, you leave everything for either nothing to happen or for the wrong thing to happen. So, sorry, there's a little bit of a rant from me.
No, I think it's a really good rant. And, I just had a chat with one of my clients a couple of days ago. So we originally started working, he had beautiful content on LinkedIn. From the outset, it looked beautiful. He had some comments, he had some engagement, but he was really frustrated with it because actually it wasn't bringing in leads from the kind of companies he could work with. So my team and I, we looked at it, and a couple of things, there weren't enough opportunities for people to raise their hands. And you and I, we both know that on LinkedIn, because people are nervous about it, they're not very likely to comment unless you make it really easy. But then the other thing which was happening, that his content wasn't really relevant to the kind of people he wanted to attract. So yes, he had some personal stories, and he had some things he did in his spare time, and he had some expert tips, but because there wasn't a strategy behind it, it just didn't attract the right kind of people. So when we first started working, we said, look, let's just do a strategy and do this for 3 months, and let's then review the results. And he's been absolutely delighted working together now for the second year. And just recently he told me, look, Nicole, you and I, we were planning to branch out more into America. So in turn, we had amended the content to be more American focused. And just about 3 weeks ago, he sent out a connection request. It was accepted. And I think, Bob, what you said earlier about that, what's your first impression? What's that digital calling card? So what's that digital calling card? What personal brand image are you sending out there? So his brand image by then was absolutely perfect because, we optimized it, all of it. So he sent the right signals. So the connection requests got accepted. They got chatting in the DMs. And 3 weeks later, this is turning into a project which is worth over $140,000. So it just shows you the power of building up your thought leadership with good questions in a relatable way, providing a mixture of content which allows your audience to check you out, but also to comment, to engage. And then you do that with patience. None of this is overnight. You do have to invest Timon, it's a little bit like learning how to jog. I just recently learned how to jog, and it took me all summer, and I'm still not complete with the learning. So with some patience, but you can have some fantastic results. So I would definitely encourage people to consider, what do people see when they what do people see when they view me on LinkedIn? Is this giving up the right messages? And am I encouraging people to take that next micro action, whether that could be to book in a strategy call, or I know with you, Bob, is to download your beautiful personal branding roadmap. Anyone who hasn't got it yet, please download it. Or it could be to listen to a podcast. So really think about, for your business, for your setting, what's the best first action you like people to take. Really important, because in that way you encourage engagement and you make it really easy for your audience to take that next step.
So I think to round off the first impression, I think Russell Brunson in .com Secrets, he talks about the attractive character. We need to build an attractive version of us for people to meet. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of building our legend. This is what people are going to meet. It's the experience they're going to have when they encounter us. And you described that really well. Where I'd like to go into now is where you've sort of nudged us, is content that's much more intentionally tactical. It's content where we're trying to achieve an effect. I think it's something I've in the past been very guilty of, is content for the sake of content. And it's something I'm trying to be more intentional about. But how do you approach tactical content with people? Content that's where there's a desired outcome.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, really important. And we all start by just getting through that fear barrier of not posting, and then just posting. I think we have to applaud everyone in the audience who posts regularly on LinkedIn, because that is definitely the first step. So when I work with clients to remind them of a balanced content model, I have the Wunder framework with 4 pillars actually, and perhaps I can just briefly run through them. So the first pillar, you and I, we talked about that, thought leadership. I call it the relatable expertise. And I do this on purpose because so often with agency owners, they feel they have to come up with a really high level stuff. Now that is really interesting. And yes, they're the expert, but they are not doing this for their peers. I think that's so important. That's why I say relatable expertise, because frankly, their peers, that is exciting. And I love comments from my peers, but they're not going to send business my way. So it's got to be relatable, it's got to be bite-sized, and it's got to be based on what their audience wants to hear. So the next pillar then is actually, let's just put sales in there. So that's my leads gen pillar, because it's so easy sometimes to get lost in expert posts, personal stories. But you have got to have some posts in there on a regular basis, which are designed to encourage your audience to take that next step, which are designed to really appeal to the people you want to work with. So I often actually, for my own strategy, if I had like a couple of sales calls the previous week and I had that person in mind who I would love to nudge to take that next step, I actually design that post with that person in mind. It does work. People then get on the phone and, hey, Nicole, you really spoke to me. I've been following you for a while and you really get me. So have a post column in there in your model, which is designed to bring in leads. And we can talk about this a little bit more. The third one then is to really your business track. So your team, your processes, what makes your service, your client experience so unique. Because in most areas, it's highly competitive. So what actually sets you apart? And it's not to just say we are better, but actually based on an understanding of who are your competitors, how do they position themselves versus how you can position yourself, what are the outcomes you achieve for your clients, what is the service experience. And then the fourth track or pillar, it's really about you as the person. So you as the agency founder, you as the company founder, what personal stories can you weave in based on your professional experience, but also based on your upbringing, your values, the beliefs you have. So ideally in a German way, I would like to have less tracks and less pillars, but particularly chosen these 4 to remind people, because what I find often we fall into 1 or 2 camps of what we find least difficult. So by having these 4 content pillars, it's a reminder, okay, I've got to do something for sales. I've got to do something to build trust, to build that personal connection. I've got to do something to really promote my business and how we do things, our team, our processes. So my recommendation is to have a balanced content calendar. And just as you said earlier, have an intention behind every post. Now, Bob, I'm not pretending that every single post of mine has got an intention behind it. I think, you have to just sort of see what works with your routine. For example, I post 3 times a week, and I always try for one of them to be a lead gen post. That's often a poll in my case, because it's really easy to open that conversation. I always try to have one of them, which is really sort of more a personal story. So, it's easier for people to engage. And then, of course, a piece of relatable expertise, because it's so important that for your audience, you position yourself as the person who can guide them, answer some difficult questions, offer some support. So really have that mixture. And as long as you do that, yes, you will grow your audience in addition with other tactics, but you will also start attracting the kind of companies from the kind of people from the kind of companies hopefully your business can support really, really well.
So I love these 4 tracks because
Thank you.
They cover everything essential. And one of the things that I would say most people on LinkedIn are guilty of is actually a virtue, which is spontaneity. I have an idea for a post, blah, 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 post. And I wish more people would do that, because that's stage 1, is just getting to the point where posting on LinkedIn is not intimidating.
Absolutely.
But once we get beyond this, it is being intentional. And I think this is where most people have the biggest opportunity. But it's much harder than it sounds to be intentional, because how do you structure that? And you give a very simple structure here, which covers all the bases. If people just focus on these 4 categories and try and balance across them, you will get way better results. One question I'd like to ask is one that I struggle with all the time. And full disclosure, you're about to see neurotic Bob. If I post something and I have a strong call to action at the end along the lines of, if you're interested in this, comment, thumbs up, or something like that, what happens if nobody comments? What happens if it falls on its arse and I'm left with egg on my face? Now, there's probably a few simple ways through this that we can use to mitigate our embarrassment. But how do you walk people through ending a post so that it's tactical enough, but not creating the circumstances of your own doom?
So I just want to pick on the first point about, you said about neurotic Bob. And I think because it's so relatable, we all want every post to have lots of likes and comments. Yeah. But do we really, or is it actually just about speaking to our specific audience and knowing that, okay, maybe I didn't get a comment on this, but what if the next time I go onto a call and the prospect says, hey, Bob, I saw that post about so-and-so. Yeah. Or, you bump into one of your clients at an event and like, Bob, you posted about this 6 months ago. I loved it. Sorry, I was so busy. I couldn't say anything. Or, I don't like LinkedIn, so I don't reply. So the reason why I want to highlight this, because just because it looks like you had no engagement on it, it doesn't mean that the people you need to see that post haven't seen it. And I hear this time and time again from my clients there. There's one guy, exactly that, I'm a creative agency owner and God, every post has got to be totally amazing. Totally amazing. It's got to get lots of engagement. I said, who says who? Anyway, so we got into the strategy and we did by posting and really broke down a lot of these barriers. And, he'd been wanting to get in front of this huge company. They had like a dream list of 10 potential clients. And suddenly the invitation for a meeting was accepted. Next time he was at his client premises here in London filming something. They're like, wow, we saw this post. It was so cool. So the reason why I'm emphasizing this is please know, just because there is no visible engagement, it doesn't mean that your audience hasn't seen it. Now, the other thing I would like to make, and I'm really guilty of this as well, is we put ourselves under such high pressure. I would invite you and everyone else and myself to see this as a learning opportunity. Every post is an experiment. So what if this one post hasn't worked? Let's review it. Let's try a different approach. It might have just been that the person you had in mind wasn't at that stage yet to say, yes, hands up, I'm interested, because we obviously know if you then comment that word, it's going to be like a sales conversation. So sometimes people need a little bit longer. So don't be discouraged by it. Now, I've experimented with you and comment this word with this word, and I'll send you the most amazing whatever it might be. It's not my favorite type of post. I think it works for some people. My favorite type of post for really getting engagement is to actually create a weekly poll. So a poll is where you ask a question, has your LinkedIn strategy been gathering dust? Yes, it's been gathering dust. No, we need to update it. Or we're not sure where to start. Or I really don't know. It's LinkedIn. Essentially, the options I'm giving, there's nothing sort of embarrassing about raising your hand. But yet I can go back on every option. So, wow, Bob, thanks for voting. What made you say that? And really gently open that conversation. So, yes, it's always an experiment. In terms of the call to action, what I sometimes experiment is this. So it will be, I always try and give value in my posts. We all do, right? That's such enough stage, actually. But I really generally try to give value. I don't always then do a call to action which is sales related. But let's say recently I took my son to the museum in London, and 90% of my clients are from abroad, so I can play around with saying, hey, guess where we were in London. Now, this is to allow my audience, for people who want to make themselves visible, to say something which is not necessarily, and Nicole Osborne, go get in touch with us straight away, but just to open that conversation. So I would encourage you to see, could you play with your call to action? Could it be something related to a picture you're showing? Could it be something easier to answer? Now, in terms of balance, and you might think, okay, Nicole, so if I do that, what would be a right balance? Now, in terms of sales posts, we said lead gen posts versus expert posts, and about company and about yourself. I would say maybe 20% of posts to have that sales intention, and 80% to expertise about your company, about yourself. Because as you give, and I know, Bob, you are really giving in your content, and I'm sure lots of our audience members are, when you really come with a sort of giving mindset, people are okay for you every now and then to have a straight sales message in there. So with a call to action, try and find a slightly different approach. Definitely try out polls, because it's a little bit more easier. And no one out there looks at every single post and judges you by your post. I think that's really in our head. Do you remember, Bob, when you launched your first website? Oh my God, when I launched my first website, I nearly wanted to poop my pants, because apparently the whole world was going to see it straight away. They don't know, right? It's the same on LinkedIn, and it's okay even for a post to visibly flop. Nothing bad happens. It's only LinkedIn trainers who are like, oh, you had no engagement. Oh, of course you have to evolve and adjust your performance. But the world doesn't end, and we're not expecting everyone to have the most amazing posts all the time. It's a learning curve, and enjoy that learning, because it's a communication tool, a two-way communication tool. But what I can compare to, we're in a fair bit of physical networking events. We didn't, when every time we go to a networking event, we learn a little bit more, right? Whether it's how many contacts we want to make, how we start good conversations, how we manage our energy. And LinkedIn is just a virtual networking event. So you will learn, and you will learn what approaches suit you most. And because there's so many different templates out there and approaches, and every LinkedIn trainer knows exactly what to do, you still have to find your own way, what sits comfortably with you and what really resonates with your audience. So I hope this was encouraging for you and for everyone who's listening to us. It is just a marketing channel. It's not the end of the world.
I think I like to look at it, and I absolutely agree with everything you said. And I think I look at it like every social media platform is simply a theater. And if we want to benefit from the theater, you have to go up on stage from time to time. Some people get incredible reactions. Some people get very quiet reactions. But at the end of the day, if you show up in the theater regularly, you're going to have some recognition and people are going to know you for the thing you do. It's really that simple.
I agree.
I think one thing people should absolutely take away from what you're saying is it's not about going viral. It's about connection. No. And like you, I've had people, when I've gone into meetings where it's become apparent very, very quickly, these people knew me very well. I'd never met them. They'd never engaged with my content. Yeah. They'd already decided before I arrived in the meeting they wanted to work with me because of the version of me they'd met online. That's what this allows for us. So your post may not go viral. They probably won't go viral. I think I had one post go viral this week for me, which I would never have expected, but I don't need it. I just need the people who are in my sales process at the moment, those people who are my maybe clients, those people who are Bob Gentle curious, to just come a little step closer, to come around the campfire.
Yeah. That's it. And so when you're struggling for post ideas, that's actually my favorite thing to do is really, okay, who are like the Nicole Osborne maybes? What do they need to hear? Yeah. And that really is a strong inspiration for a good post. And it doesn't always have to be a leads gen post. You know, sometimes it could just be you sharing your process and talking about maybe a new thing you've added or sharing some feedback from a client. So actually, you know, the whole going viral, I've had some strange conversations in VDMs with people who've gone viral, but they actually haven't got a sustainable business. So everyone's version is so different, right, of success. So the whole comparing is, we all do it, but it's really not healthy. And I always say to my clients who are like, oh, what, we are an agency and we have to be perfect. I always say, why don't you look at one of your content creators you really admire and look them up and they just started. And just that step of how they started encourages you, because I certainly did that at the beginning of my video journey. It was actually Andrew and Pete at the time, who I know we both, you know, we go to Atomicon, which is a very cool conference. And when I watched their first YouTube videos, I'm like, okay, they're amazing now. Everyone has to start somewhere. It's okay to allow yourself to fail and to learn and just to get that little bit better every time you do something. It's the same with LinkedIn. Yeah. It's not healthy to compare yourself to people who already have done it for years. Start now. That's good enough.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then I think we could go a lot deeper on this, and maybe we should sometime soon. But we need to go into section 2 and find out what's behind the 3-thing window. If you're new to the show, or if you haven't been listening for a little while, change things up a little bit. We have a part 2, which is where we focus on 3 things people can do today. So, Nicole, thing number 1, what's behind window number 1?
So everyone I speak to really wants to get more engagement on LinkedIn. Of course we do, right? Because you don't want to be shouting into the void. So I want you to have a look at your last 10 posts. And I want you to take a step back and I want you to ask yourself, how easy did I make it for a person to comment, to like it, to answer my question? And I'm pretty sure what you will find is that your question was simply too difficult or too challenging. We have to remember people are on social to connect, to learn, to be educated. And our content, you know, if your question is sort of in a way which, what challenge resonates with you, or did you struggle with this? Frankly, we're also on social media to make ourselves look good, to represent our company. So you are not really likely to say, yeah, I struggle with this, because who wants to admit that? So reflect on your questions. Is it a simple enough question? One of my favorite things is I'm German, so I love a good list. So maybe I list 5 tips and I will say, hey, which one do you like most? Or what have I missed? Is it a simple enough question? And will it allow the audience member, when they do say something, to sound good? But what do I mean by sound good? It's to look intelligent. So it's easy to add something thoughtful. It's easy just to say something as opposed to really having to think too hard. Because when you think too hard, you won't do it. You just scroll past. You know, we are on LinkedIn. It's a sociable platform. So if you want more engagement, the first thing, Bob, I recommend for everyone in the audience is to look at their last 10 posts and just see, could I have made it easier for someone to comment, for someone to share their opinion on this? Because this is all about opening that dialogue.
That sounds so obvious. However, I'm reflecting on that thinking, shame on you, Bob. I've probably missed so much low-hanging fruit because I put too much friction into that engagement process. I'm either inviting people to make themselves vulnerable, or perhaps, there's so much opportunity there. Just going back through those 10 posts, I know I'm going to learn a lot.
And hopefully you get more engagement as well, just by that simple mind shift.
Yes. I mean, I can already, just thinking about it, yes. Window number 2. What's thing number 2?
So number 2 goes a little bit deeper. Again, I want you to look at your last 10 posts, and I want you to have a think about, was this message really relevant for the person who is Bob curious or Nicole curious? Or was it more targeted at my peers? What do I mean by that? We always get so carried away so easily. We're so passionate about our area of expertise and we want to sound like an expert. Of course, we are an expert. But often our posts are pitched at a too high level. So perhaps if I could relate this to me training agency founders in LinkedIn, yes, I could get excited about algorithm changes and the latest research coming out. And that's really important. And of course, I keep track of it because I want to know. And then I need my clients to know. But if I talk about that, that's not interesting for an agency founder because they run their own agencies. They probably worry about AI or remote working or bringing people back into the office or how to pitch better. They're not worried about the latest algorithm updates. So this is a really practical example. Yes, I need to bring in some research to the table, but talk about the things which really are the struggles, the aspirations, the goals of my specific target audience. I don't know about you, Bob, but I'm not posting on LinkedIn for my peers. Frankly, I find social media draining. This is a business tool for me, a personal branding tool. I do it to grow my brand, to grow my audience, and to get in front of my favorite kind of clients. So my posts and turns really have to speak to them. And I know this is sort of a harsh truth for people because it's so much easier to talk about expertise in a way. But really, would your prospective client find that interesting? Would that really relate to them? Would they say to you, yeah, that's exactly what's been going on. That's exactly what we've been thinking. So that was my second point. Really review your post again and say, okay, who's it for? Peers? Why would you post for peers, really? Or is it for our prospective clients? Is it for the last sales call person you had who maybe just needed that little nudge?
It's interesting, as you describe that, I can see 2 responses to it. A lot of people, when they post, are very, very conscious of the competitors. And actually, if you were to create a post for your ideal customer, it's often a post that your potential competitor is going to almost look down their nose at sometimes. And who it's for is so important because you will not impress your competitors and your customers. You just won't. You have to pick one. And I know, I know who I'm going to pick.
I know who pays the bills. Of course, definitely LinkedIn. Let's also just acknowledge that LinkedIn is a very supportive platform. So of course, I support my competitors. They support me. But my posting strategy is not to get more on my feed and to get more of their comments. No, I want to speak to that person sitting in their agency doing an amazing job for their clients, but tearing up their hair because they don't know how to get better clients or how to get leads more regularly. That's the person I need to talk to.
That's really interesting. So thing number 3, what's behind window number 3?
So thing number 3 then, and I'm saying this because I see it so often. Again, look at your last 10 posts. Do you really give a window into what is it like to work with you and with your team? Do you really give a window into what you care about as a person? People really truly want to know about a person behind a logo, a person behind an agency website, a service provider website. So what glimpse are you giving them? Have you had any behind the scenes content? So, maybe a team meeting, or maybe you're going to an event and you shared a learning point for your audience. So I really want you to consider the last 10 posts. Have I given an impression of what it's like to work with us, what processes we use? And the reason why I wanted to add this is because behind the scenes content and things you already are doing in your business life, which, you kind of take for granted because frankly, you go maybe to 5 conferences a year, or your team meets once a week, or, you're finishing out a new process or a new presentation. For you, it's a little bit boring, but for your audience, this is interesting. This is really authentic content, and only you can be sharing that. And that is really your unique take on how you work with clients, how you make them feel, how you make your team feel. So my third pitch today is really to look at your last 10 posts. And if you're not sharing any behind the scenes content, and if you're not showing what it's like to work with you, please try that out, because that's a way of really building trust and giving someone an honest sort of insight into what it's like to work with you. Obviously, don't show, oh, I'm a VA and I hate organizing, or, it's got to be on brand and it's got to show good light, but also keep it real. People can really see if something is just made up, or you use AI tools such as ChatGPT for your content and you just absolutely commented and copy that. I know, Bob, you had the best conversation about with Cherry Letlaw, a common friend of ours, right, about how you need to prompt ChatGPT and how to make it your own. So please, listeners, go back to the episode. It's really, really helpful. So yes, are you sharing behind the scenes? And does it sound like you check those things in your last 10 posts?
So I really like this. And I think this is actually one of the biggest opportunities, because for me, social media is about relationship building. And if you're not available for people to have a relationship with, it's very, very difficult to build that connection. I remember when I'd met very high profile people that were very good about making enough about themselves available so you really felt you knew them. Yeah. When I met them in person, I was bonded to them. I think if I were like a little baby chicken, I'd imprinted on them. They were my person. And our content can do this. It can allow our ideal clients to, this sounds so mean, but they can imprint on us. Yeah. But if we hide behind logos, if we hide behind portfolio work, Chris Do is a wonderful example of this. Chris Do, and he's from your world, agency land. He's one of the real sort of flagship personal brands. Yeah. Because he's courageous in his content. And I think this is the element of courage, especially for agency owners, where it's so easy to fall into imposter syndrome and comparison because the work is being judged a lot of the time. Or is my office as big and fancy as the other guy? Mm-hmm. Have a little bit of humility. Think, who does my business need me to be today? It needs you to step up and build relationships. So
I couldn't agree more. I once, a client of mine came over to the UK to attend an event I was speaking at, and for some reason we ended up helping him come back to London, train issues. So he got to see, my 10-year-old showed around the house. So he got to see my office and he was like, wow, Nicole, this is Wunderstar's headquarters. I'm so excited to be here. Of course, he was excited because I was sharing my home, and he's the loveliest of guys. But it's also that brand recognition because, I show up like this in my calls. I show up like this in a lot of my content. So what visible things can you use to bring out that brand and to for people to meet the person we're working with? And you're absolutely right. Chris Do is a true artist. And, I was so delighted when he invited me to speak on the future of a podcast about LinkedIn. He's just so inspirational particularly for designers who struggle with putting their fabulous work out there in a way which brings back clients. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. And again, it's the power of personal branding, which got me on this podcast about having a great LinkedIn profile, following things that are, putting a certain image out there, which is genuine to who I am. So it's all the kind of steps you always talk about in these beautiful podcast episodes. So people check out more of Bob's podcast episodes. You will learn loads.
Yeah. Nicole, I know you have things to do soon, so I'm going to bring things to a close there. This has been a lot of fun. It's probably not to put down anybody else that I've ever talked about LinkedIn with, but it's one of the most productive LinkedIn conversations I've ever had. It's been really useful. I'm going to approach it slightly differently now. So, and hopefully the listener at home or the viewer, if this is on YouTube, will go out and take action. But from me, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, to help with these content ideas, hopefully you and I both inspired people today to try out some new content ideas. But if people like to get a free download, which is 30 free content ideas, please hop onto my website at wunderstars.com/content-inspiration, and you get ideas related to your audience, related to your expertise, all the things we talked about today.
I will put a link to that in the show notes, either above or below, depending on where you get this. And if people want to get closer to you, what's your favorite platform to hang out? I think I know the answer.
Come and see me on LinkedIn. You know, all the things we talked about, hopefully you can witness in action on my profile. So yes, it's Nicole Osborne on LinkedIn, and always happy to help. So people do reach out and come and say hello. If you learned something exciting today, tag Bob and myself. We will reply as well. So yeah, come and see us on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. So that does bring us to the end of another episode. Thank you for listening at home. If you did enjoy this show, you will love the Personal Brand Business Roadmap. It's 50 pages of everything you need to start, scale, or fix your expert business. Just click the link in the show notes or visit amplifyme.agency/roadmap. And if you did enjoy the show, I would also invite you to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if that's on YouTube, that's a like and a subscribe as well. Thanks at home for listening or for watching. And Nicole, thank you. You've been awesome.
Dankeschön, Bob. Really appreciate you inviting me.